If you'll turn to page 90 in your Quit and Quit book, about 2/3 of the way down the page, you see a section 4.6 if you're using the, the 9th edition, called Degrees of Freedom. Degrees of freedom is an important concept in that we have to use that and report that when we communicate our, when we interpret our analysis and when we analyze if we're not using SPSS, but we have to know what it means for when we communicate. So degrees of freedom, it's a fairly simple, it's a simple concept to memorize how you get to it or how you get it, but I need to explain a little bit about what it means and why it makes sense. So if you will look at the definition, this is just as helpful as I'll get out here. The definition of degrees of freedom is, and I quote, degrees of freedom, DF, refers to the number of values that are free to vary given one or more mathematical restrictions in a sample being used to estimate a population characteristic. Any questions about that? All right. When you have, okay, you ready for the simple part now? Okay. When you have a distribution, a single distribution, and we'll expand degrees of freedom when you have more, when you do different analyses. But degrees of freedom, you ready for your next formula? DF, degrees of freedom, is equal to, you ready for this, n minus 1. Now, we don't need SPSS to calculate that for us. Yeah, but it does. It won't do some other things, but it'll sure as heck do this one. For a single distribution, no, I should say for a single distribution, because sometimes you've got more than one, but it's still n minus 1 for each individual distribution. For a single distribution, the degrees of freedom is n minus 1. Here's why. Let's say I've got I've got 5 things, so n equals 5. And I've got 5 places to put 5 things. So when I complete the first blank, do I have a choice of what goes in the first blank? I got A, B, C, D, and E. I can put anyone I want to. Do I have a choice? The answer is yes. So we'll just pick one. I'll put a D here, okay? I had an option to choose. That's a degree of freedom right there. There's one degree of freedom right there. Now I've used up the D. I want to put something in the next spot. Do I have a choice of what to put in the next spot? Yeah, I'm going to put, let's say I'm going to put a C. I had a choice, an option, that's a degree of freedom. I've got A, B, and E left. I've got 3 spots left. Do I have a choice? Rhetorical question now. Do I have a choice of what to put in the next spot? The nods are more uniformly now, and I'm seeing yeses. See, I'm going to put it, let's say I'll put an A there. I just chose it. Since I was able to choose it, that's freedom, a degree of freedom. I've got B and E left. I got a choice of what to put there. I'm going to put E there. I got to choose. That's a degree of freedom. Do I have a choice of what to put? No, I do not. B is the only thing left. I do not have a degree of freedom there. So in this case, I have 4 degrees of freedom. Well, n was 5, so the degree of freedom is 5 minus 1. And I see 4 check marks there. So 4 degrees of freedom. So degrees of freedom is n minus 1. Sometimes you got more than one n because sometimes you got more than one distribution, but still the basic idea is n minus 1. And we'll have some other, when we combine distributions and we do some other kinds of analyses, we'll calculate degrees of freedom, sometimes a little different but not contrary to this. So degrees of freedom is n minus 1. Now, when you do use SPSS to analyze and you get an output window, if it gives you degrees of freedom, it's just going to tell you df equals 4. I don't think it had that in the last output window, did it? I don't believe it did. But if we were asking for like some inferential statistics, which we'll get into toward the end of the first half of class, then it'll tell you what DF is. So it will be what you think it is, and we'll go over when it gives us degrees of freedom. In a lot of examples, I will say as degrees of freedom equals 4. Why is it 4? And you'll tell me, oh, because with 5 minus 1. Usually n's a lot more than that, but degrees of freedom is simply n minus 1. It's based on the number of times you have an option to do something. Questions, thoughts, comments about that?